So I built 11 frames from those 3 pine boards, and as you can see they're just a basic sort of rectangular frame. Nothing special, you know, no cove cuts, no inlays, but they're pretty boring. But I've been playing around with a few techniques to try and make this pine a lot more interesting to look at. So I've done a few test pieces, so let's have a look at those. So here's some pieces of scrap pine that I've been playing around with. So just here's your typical Shou Sugi Ban wood burn, so a bit of a light burn with a torch and then sand, and that's a common technique, and there's a lot of YouTube videos about that, but that looks quite nice and is quite effective. So over here is an example where I did a full burn, so made the wood sort of all char up and crack up, and then I painted it with white paint, let that dry, and then sanded it off, and then finished it with a water-based varnish, and that made a pretty cool technique. I quite like that. Here's a failed attempt at some Crackle paint. I'll explain that in a bit. And there's another failed attempt at some Crackle paint. So here's Crackle paint, a piece that actually worked. So you just, to do this technique, you just paint with a thin coat of wood glue, PVA glue, and then wait for it to go tacky, and then paint white paint over the top. One thing I did find is that just my normal white PVA glue worked a lot better than my carpenter's glue, so my Titebond. I couldn't get the Titebond to do this technique very well, so, but just the normal PVA worked. And this sample here is where I just did a full burn and then finished with oil base. This was full burn and finished with water-based varnish, and then over the top of that water base I painted some glue and then white paint, and you can see that Crackle paint technique worked well. And that was just another failed Crackle paint one with Titebond. And then this final piece, I just carved the pine with a gouge to try and get a cool texture, but it's very hard to see. But then I burnt the wood and did the gouge work, did the carving work, and you can see that looks quite good, so I like that. So I'm going to try all these different techniques out on some of these photo frames. So here's the 11 frames all finished up, and now the 11, I had a couple of wins and a few fails. So these two are the full char and then crackle paint technique over the top of that full char, and I think they came out really good, as you can see. So yeah, happy with those ones. So this is the Shou Sugi Ban technique, and that's a pretty tried and true technique, and yeah, they're okay. This one here, these ones are the full char, and they're probably my favourite actually. I think they work really well, and there's a pretty cool texture really. Then I've got the ones that I charred and then gouged, and I had a fair bit of trouble with them. The wood sort of fought me the whole way when I was carving it, so then I re-burnt them and sanded them, so you can see how they came out, and they're okay. I'm not hugely impressed with those, but they'll do. This is the one that I did the full char and then painted and then sanded that paint off. On the test piece that I did, that worked quite well, but on the frame itself I found it really hard to sand the paint off without it sort of pulling out of the fully charred lines, I guess. So it's okay, that one, but again, nothing great. And this one here was just one that I painted white and then did the crackle paint technique with black paint over the top, but I should have added a bit more blue because I'm not happy with how it crackled. I would have liked more crackle. So in all, I had a few wins, like I said, and a few fails, but I learnt some pretty cool techniques, particularly this one, the full char and that crackle paint. That's pretty cool. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and hopefully this gave you some ideas for your own projects. Cheers.